It was the spring of 1942. The entire world was consumed with the biggest war in the history of mankind. In Europe, the Allied forces were fighting against Axis opposition, and in the Pacific, the United States, along with countless Pacific islands and colonies, had been brutally attacked by the Japanese. In the Central Pacific, the Allies were still recovering from the attack on Pearl Harbor, and in the South, they were pushed back as far as Australia. At a time when it seemed impossible to defeat the Japanese forces, despite having lost thousands of miles of land of territorial gain and having experienced great losses in troops, General Douglas MacArthur stood against the opposition. He became one of the greatest military heroes of World War II by valiantly taking back his land from the Japanese, by fighting alongside his troops, rallying his men with impressive courage, and using his strategic actions to overthrow the Japanese. These feats inevitably led to the defeat of Japan and saved the Pacific from certain tyranny. Douglas MacArthur was born on January 26, 1880 in Little Rock, Arkansas. Being born on a military base, he was destined for a career in the service. His father, Arthur MacArthur, was a recognized general, and many other relatives and his descendants in his family also served in the military forces. MacArthur once said, "I learned to ride and shoot even before I could read or write." In school, he was an average student, but once he enrolled in a military academy, he excelled quickly and graduated first in his class. Douglas also explained, "When I joined the Army, even before the turn of the century, it was the fulfillment of all my boyish hopes and dreams." After graduating and during World War I, he advanced in his military rank and eventually was appointed Chief of Staff in 1930. He kept this position until 1935, when he was dispatched to the Philippines to develop a defensive strategy for the United States. It was in the Philippines where Douglas started to become more and more recognized. In July 1941, he was called back into action due to the invading Japanese forces. Despite warnings of an impressive invasion in the Philippines following the attack on Pearl Harbor, MacArthur was not able to hold his ground with his young army. He was forced to retreat all the way back to Australia, leaving tens of thousands of troops behind. It was then, after his bitter defeat, that he proclaimed, "The President of the United States ordered me to break through the Japanese lines and proceed from the corridor to Australia for the purposes, as I understand it, of organizing the American offense against Japan, a primary objective of which is the relief of the Philippines. I came through, and I shall return." For the next 2 years, General Douglas MacArthur fought back the Japanese opposition. After only a few months of struggle, MacArthur was able to successfully defend Port Moresby and stop Japanese forces. With a burning passion, he was able to push back the Japanese, and he eventually regained the Philippines. It is here where he became known as a great military hero. A reason why he is known as such a great military leader is for valiantly defeating the Japanese. Before invading the Philippines, General Douglas MacArthur and his troops managed to take over all of the South Pacific and were able to do this with little casualties. When compared to other famous military battles, MacArthur's massive campaign suffered as many casualties as the invasion of Normandy, and about the same as the Battle of the Bulge. In both of these battles that were led by General Eisenhower, only small portions of land were gained, while, in contrast, General MacArthur succeeded at taking over all of the South Pacific. Another factor that led to MacArthur's overwhelming success in the Pacific theater was the way that he was able to rally his troops. General MacArthur's rather simple quote of, "I shall return," gave hopes all across the Philippines and is what gave power and courage to the Filipino resistance. MacArthur once recalled, "It was scraped in the sands of the beaches, it was daubed in the walls of the barrios, it was stamped on the mail, it was whispered in the cloisters of the church. It became the battle cry of a great underground swell that no Japanese bayonet could still." The smallest words that MacArthur said gave courage to everyone against the Axis powers and eventually led to the downfall of the Japanese. During World War II, General Douglas MacArthur was also recognized for his impressive strategic actions, which inevitably led to the end of the war. The general wouldn't have been able to achieve the amazing feat of capturing almost the entire South Pacific while suffering little casualties without his impressive strategies. Throughout the entire war, he used island-hopping tactics to slowly gain territory, one island at a time. He explained that you hit them where they aim. When you attack them where they are not located, you cut off supplies from other Japanese outposts, slowly weakening them and making them easier to capture. An intelligence officer by the name of Japanese Colonel Masichu Julio commented on this strategy. With minimum losses, attacked and seized a relative weak area, constructed airfields, and then proceeded to cut off the supply lines to Japanese troops to that area. Japanese strongpoints were gradually starved out. We respected this type of strategy because it gained most while losing the least. General Douglas MacArthur was able to outsmart the Japanese at every turn, causing them to lose valuable land and resources. By the fall of 1944, MacArthur was on the doorsteps of the Philippines, and after years of Japanese oppression, the Allies returned to liberate them. Once he landed on the beaches, he proclaimed, "People of the Philippines, I have returned. Rally for me." It was at this moment that Americans remembered and find the most inspiring out of all achievements of the war. Even more than Japan's surrender in September 1945, General Douglas MacArthur's struggle and fulfillment of his promise to both the Filipinos and the Americans perfectly embraced the true passion that America showed during the war. The Pacific War ended with many victories for Douglas MacArthur. Before the war was over, MacArthur received the Medal of Honor and rose to the rank of 5-star general. Japan finally surrendered following the 2 atomic bomb droppings, and MacArthur, as Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in the Pacific, formally accepted the surrender aboard the battleship USS Missouri on September 2, 1945. This wasn't the end for Douglas MacArthur. After the war, he continued to help rebuild Japan and even fought in the Korean War. But it is during his Pacific campaign where he really showed his heroism and is the most remembered for. If MacArthur had not rallied his men with impressive courage, fought valiantly beside them to recover land, and used his strategic actions to make advances, the United States may have never been able to successfully overthrow the Japanese. At the least, countless more American lives were saved by the actions that Douglas MacArthur performed during World War II.